Today's businesses are on a vigilant watch for threats in an ongoing cyber war. It's time to get real-world solutions to protect and secure your valuable business information anytime, anywhere. Welcome to Cybersecurity America.
Today's topic is going to be incident response, threat intelligence. We're going to dive into the details. What are we seeing in the real world? I am just lucky today to have two great guests. My first one is the Chief Product Officer for Surefire Cyber. She's part of a team that's redefining the incident response model right now in our market. Surefire's technology-enabled response team guides our clients through difficult decisions they face during a cyber investigation, with a focus on threat intelligence and finding ways to enable responders, partners, clients, solutions, and then move them faster and make better decisions. She's a LinkedIn leading instructor or learning instructor with courses on cyber threat intelligence. Throughout her career, she's been nominated for a number of cyber and entrepreneurial awards. Prior to working with us here, she founded a cyber recruiting business and a cyber events business and a recruitment company because of the largest cyber recruiter company in the UK, and expanded that into the US, which led her to relocating here in the United States in 2020. And both of those businesses were acquired. So really great to have you. And that's Karla Redford. Thanks for having you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And my next guest too, also from Surefire, is one of our leading directors of incident response and forensics here at the company. He's been with Surefire Cyber since June of 2024. He's a digital forensics incident response principal and engagement lead, and he quickly moved into a director of incident response for us. So he's been doing a phenomenal job. Now, prior to him coming over here at Surefire, he worked at Tetra Defense and Arctic Wolf Networks as a director of restoration engagement lead. So he's familiar with doing solution-driven professional services with 15 years of cybersecurity and technical experience with a focus on digital forensics and incident management. He's managed and worked large-scale forensics and recovery operations, including networks of 500 plus locations and 50,000 endpoints. He's also part of successfully negotiated ransomware matters to fractional costs of the original demand to help support client financial strains. Welcome to the show, both of you. I'm so glad to have y'all.
Hey, thank you. Excited to be here.
That's great. Now, Karla, we were talking about the world of incident response, and there was a lot of stuff that was happening from an intelligence perspective and things that we wanted to pass on to others that they know. But what are you seeing out there in the intel world that we should know about right now?
Yeah, so much. And we get a front row seat to the people that are affected by incidents. So we can often see things before they're maybe widespread in the intelligence news. And one of the things that I think gets really overlooked, ransomware is the sexy thing to talk about. And I have a lot of stuff we can share about that. But business email compromise affects all sorts of businesses, all sorts of sizes. It's really as simple as someone clicking on the wrong thing at the wrong time. And we can all be vulnerable to that. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot of lately is an increase in the amount of people clicking on links that come through as part of an email attachment, rather than clicking on a link that comes through in an email. So it's a small change. It's not where a document comes through and it does something by itself, it auto runs. It's where someone actually has decided, hey, I trust this attachment, I'm going to open it. And because I trust the attachment, I'm going to click on whatever link is included. So I think that could indicate a couple of things. Either our email security solutions are doing a good job where they're blocking the links that come through in emails, or maybe we've done a good job of telling people don't click on links in emails, but they haven't quite carried that over to links in attachments. So Billy's obviously like frontline on some more of this stuff. So I don't know if you have anything to add there, but that's an interesting trend we've noticed in the last couple of months.
No, I definitely think it makes sense. I think with solutions like Mimecast, Proofpoint, those types of things, I think they do a lot better of scanning links as they're in emails than actually sandboxing documents and following through on those secondary links. It's probably an added service that a lot of clients don't use, right? They think that bare minimum package is good enough, and it's starting to look like that's needs to change, right? You need to do that in-depth analysis of those documents as well.
I think that is interesting. They're looking for documents that are preparing to be viruses or malware, but not looking at the URLs that are inciting them and then taking that to the next level of going check those URLs. And so I think, is that just a real gap and a blind spot you're seeing a lot of exploitation coming from is using URLs and documents?
Yeah, there's been a big increase. Say last quarter of last year, first couple of months of this year, probably about 2/3 of the business email compromise cases we had were people clicking on links in emails. And that's gone down a little bit, closer to around 40%. And we've seen a big increase in the amount of links people are clicking on in attachments. So the kind of corresponding decrease in the links in the email body corresponding to links in attachments. So potentially like threat actors adapting their methods there as well. Because these cases, like Billy will, I'm sure, say as well, they can net people quite a lot of money. We've seen companies lose in the millions by someone gaining access to their email environment.
And then Billy, I think what are you seeing from a ransomware perspective? How are the actors moving? Is there any threat actors that are more prolific right now? Or are there others that are struggling? What are you seeing from a ransomware threat actor perspective?
I still think VPN exploitation is the number one we're seeing, right? MFA, unfortunately, just doesn't exist on a lot of companies, which in 2025 is crazy to think. That, or when MFA does exist, you're seeing just a little bit of misconfiguration, right? Users that shouldn't have been allowed in VPN are on that surface, or misconfigurations of bypass, people that are in bypass groups that are still allowed on a VPN. Beyond that, though, I think a little more change or some uniqueness in terms of backdoors. I think we're starting to see, right? We're starting to see a couple more groups use SSH backdoor tunnels to try to get into systems instead of just the normal ransomware, any desk, RMM type of tools as well, which is a little more unique to see.
And
Okay.
what are you seeing? What are you seeing mostly is some of the primary reasons for these massive ransomware attacks? Or I know there's a couple different areas it generally falls into, but what do you think is the most common 3-4 themes of areas? You said firewalls, but are there some others that are really critical that it's a repeated theme?
I would say just firewalls is number one for sure, right? Just VPN being exploited. Beyond that, root point of compromise, we're definitely seeing an uptick, I think, in phishing as well, related to ransomware attacks, right? People compromising credentials, sometimes convincing people just to give them a Zoho assist or some type of just RMM tool to get back into the environment. Beyond that, not many. Those are usually, I would say 80-90% of the cases we're seeing right now are probably tied to one of those two as like a vector of entry.
Hey, Karla, it was interesting what he said. It seems like there's still a lot of attacks that are remote management tools. Like they're designed to be there and installed on all the machines and work properly. And now it's just an authentication piece. If you're able to steal their credentials, you're able to get into a desktop management function. Are you seeing that in the intelligence world? What you're seeing, are there more attacks using the corporate tools that are out there? You don't need to exploit anything if the tool's already there that has all the access rights.
You see those tools used throughout the course of an attack pattern and throughout the attack, but we are seeing, to Billy's point, it's not a big percentage of the cases that we have, but it is increasing in terms of that social engineering aspect. And I think this is in the wider news a lot with kind of scattered spider attacks against large retail organizations. And we see that on a smaller business level as well. So social engineering, where you're calling someone, convincing them to download one of these tools. Zoho Assist, like Billy said, is one of the ones we're seeing used by these groups quite a lot. There's a group called Silent in particular that really follows this method where they're convincing you to download this tool. They're then exfiltrating data while they're maybe on a call with you and then extorting the company for that data. That social engineering aspect is a real growing threat to organizations of all sizes. That particular group really are targeting professional service organizations. We'll focus on accounting firms and law firms, which again, it's a little unusual to see such targeting of a particular industry. Normally, we see these groups target a technology rather than an industry, but this one's definitely an emerging trend.
Yeah,
And I
that's
also
good.
think, just to add to that, like I definitely think there's a lot more compromised accounts coming into play, right? We've had quite a few cases where there's a weird dwell time. So we see a lot of activity in April that just completely disappeared. And a month and a half, 2 months later, they're now starting to come back in, which kind of indicates like an initial access broker is possibly related to selling credentials and getting people into do the encryption of it.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
glad you said that. It's something I noticed in the data I was looking at for our cases just today, actually. So our top groups that we see the activity period we see is really small typically. It could be less than 12 hours, 24 hours for the big groups. So Akira, Quillin, Play, their dwell time that we see is very short. But throughout May, to Billy's point, we saw much longer dwell time. Dragon Force in particular, we saw a lot of cases where they were in there for several weeks from where we could see that first activity to encryption. Definitely seeing a trend to longer dwell time there, to Billy's point.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
Billy,
we
the
sorry.
key term I keep hearing is that the perimeter is dissolved. The perimeter is now the user. It's not, used to be the firewall. Used to say the perimeter was a firewall. Now it's not. Everybody remote's remote. You have web applications, you get cloud-based applications. You can go anywhere. It's the perimeter is now the user and everything around what the user has access to and what data they have access to. Is that a good way to look at it? We need to switch focus in incident response to just looking at the firewall as a perimeter and just hone in on the user first. Does that make sense, or what are your thoughts?
I definitely think it's something that hand in hand needs to come into play, right? Attack surface is one of the biggest reasons that we see attacks happen, right? They need to understand what their public surface is, what can be attacked, and then how to prevent it. But I agree. Then I think EDR or some type of advanced solution that really protects the end user is starting to really be pushed, right? These
Almost
McAfee's,
mandated.
the smaller end antiviruses just aren't keeping up with what needs to happen to protect an environment correctly.
No, I agree. I think what we're seeing is that MDR is going to be just like MFA. You're going to have somebody managing your EDR product 24/7. There's many companies that do that. We have partners that do that as well. You can see that's going to just be a mandated function. I think you're also going to, as they move forward, as you move more applications in the cloud, you're going to have more of this password attacking, authentication issues, and it's going to be more of a BEC, more applications as we move forward. Now, Billy, tell me from the ransomware perspective, how much are they actually fulfilling and coming back and giving encryption keys for us to decrypt systems? When they get paid, do they fulfill? I always wonder what's a percentage of them actually, and which ones just stiff you?
Almost always. You rarely see anyone get stiffed nowadays. Early on, 5, 6 years ago, the smaller groups like Phobos variants, those ones would sometimes do double extortion and really push you to pay multiple times to buy a decryption tool. But right now, it's very rare that we would come across a group if you pay them for a tool that you wouldn't get it. Now we've seen a couple cases where we paid for a tool that just did not work flat out, and a lot of troubleshooting came out of it. And the threat actor promised new tools, and that never came. But almost always, they usually are good about at least that decryption tool piece. Now the data suppression side, definitely a lot more harder to make those payments. You don't ever want to make those payments. And I think we're seeing, especially with a couple groups in particular, that they don't even hold up their end of the bargain, whether or not they'll provide proof of deletion if they do want to provide it, or if they even actually do the deletion. We've seen a few cases where they've came out and posted clients 2 or 3 months later.
How do you prove deletion? What do they give you to prove deletion? A screenshot?
It depends. Sometimes you get videos of, I've heard rumors in the industry that there's one video that they shot of a deletion happening while you can actually see a copy of that data in the background of the deletion video. Sometimes it's just a simple log file. Sometimes it's like a GIF that functions through a bunch of screenshots. Usually those three are the most common methods.
I remember there was one incident and they extorted them, and it was so much in Bitcoin, right? It's 3 million in Bitcoin that they wanted. And this is before they engaged the company. And this is not with us. This was for a previous company. And the CEO was saying, hey, this is okay. The CFO is going to send me $3 million in cash to my account. And I'm going to go to Coinbase and buy the Bitcoin. And I'm going to pay the guy out. I'm a former sales guy. It's okay. We can negotiate this. I know I can get a lower sale. And I'm like, stop, don't do that. Massive problems. But there's companies. So when they do pay, why don't you tell me, how does somebody facilitate a payment? How does that all stay aboard? How does that work? I know there's other companies that do that.
Yeah, we involve usually one of two companies, Digital Mint or Digital Asset Redemption. They go through the full process for us. Usually what happens is that introduction comes in, the client has to fill out a specific set of paperwork to facilitate the payment. We provide them with details so that a sanction check can come in. We don't want to pay terrorists, and so there's a very strict process
Okay.
that to vet that group and make sure who we're paying isn't tied to any of those organizations. Beyond that, that's pretty simple in terms of that process. And then we usually do a kind of a stepped approach. We'll send a small amount just to verify that we're sending to the correct address, and then that full amount usually goes after.
It's interesting. And so you also, in the time where you're negotiating with the threat actor, you're pulling intelligence from them, right? You're getting proof of life. What are the things that, let's say we're not going to pay at all. We have a backup. It's okay. We're not going to pay. But there's still good intelligence you can pull out of the threat actor, right? How do y'all handle that? How do y'all continue to pull that intel out?
Yeah, so we usually have our standard bucket of process is as we get engaged with those threat actors, right? There's a lot of forensic value that comes out of it more specifically. So we will ask almost all these groups steal data, right? So they'll often provide a file list, what that data is. And then we obviously want to verify that have that data. So we'll ask for some of those files from that data. Beyond that is just that decryption proof. A couple reasons to do it. If you do need to buy a tool, right, you want to make sure that it's going to actually work. So sending a couple files that are encrypted and getting them back decrypted is helpful. But also it's a verification tool, right? You don't want to talk to the wrong people. And so if they can't prove that they can decrypt files, you might start to question whether or not you're talking to the right person.
Yeah. And Billy, and Karla, you could tell me how many people are doing this. I've seen some occasions where there's been fake data, like the company's logo was on documents. It looked like banking documents, but it wasn't. It was fake data. It was all test data, for instance, you got from some system. So do you see extortion where that's not really their data? There wasn't a ransomware, but they're able to still con people into thinking there was and making a payment. Is that very prevalent or no?
I don't think we've seen that, not that I can think of. What we have seen is maybe data that is old that's been leaked on the dark web some years ago, and then someone else has found it and tried to re-extort the company some time on. Sometimes that can happen, but I don't think we've seen the threat actors come up with fake data. I don't know if you have, Billy.
No, I haven't seen the fake data. I've seen a couple threat actors associate a business with the same spelling of the business, right? Sometimes there's businesses that have there's multiple businesses with the same name, and we've seen different logos, different things tied to that business. But at the end of the day, the data is actually correct, but nothing fake creations wise.
In this case, it was actual test data because it looked like statements. It just had John Doe and Superman and Batman. It just had all these. Obviously, these are not the guys' names, right? It's test data of some sort. So that was all interesting. And then I think from your perspective is that from these incidents, I think it falls in one of 5 categories, right? You have Active Directory hardening, usually is how you remediate a lot of these issues, excessive permissions, too many people are in different roles. You have global admins that don't need to be there, service accounts, a lot of stuff on the Active Directory side. And I think the second one is pretty much the firewalls, like you said, is one of the services we do is resiliency is locking down in these areas, but resiliency is taking a look at that firewall, looking at its configuration, being able to provide those kind of rapid remediation that you need. Now, it's not replacing the firewall. It's not building 5 new ones and going to a different model. It's rapid configuration remediation. And I believe the third one is the backup configuration, right? Where we don't do IT services, but this is that one that we're looking at because it impacts our ability to recover in ransomware significantly. If you don't have immutable backups and your backups are not designed properly, when you do hit with ransomware, instead of it being a simple restoration, now it's a massive negotiation and everything else, where if your backups were in place, you would be solid. And I think the number 4 is just the O365 configuration. There's a lot of stuff that can occur. I've seen in a previous company where someone had a server that was in their Azure environment and they accidentally exposed that to the internet, RDP to the internet, and they got popped. That's happened twice. So in the old days, you used to,
because Azure used to have that by default. It used to be open RDP by default.
by default, yeah. And it was crazy. That's almost like they had POP3 and IMAP4 legacy protocols by default, and they were password stuffing because you didn't have to do MFA off of that. So
Yep.
they shut all that down as well from the tenant. So yeah, and then so just locking that down. And what I found too is just when you replicate on-prem to cloud or 365, you're replicating that SAM database, and you have several different ways to do that and several bad ways to do that, like installing it on domain controller versus putting onto a member server. And so there's a lot of these best practices that these smaller companies just ignore. So 365, and I think the last one, like you were saying, is MFA, is just never seems to be implemented, or the attackers just hone in on these non-MFA accounts really quick and fast. And that's an area that some people say, you know what, don't write me a report. Don't tell me about it again. You told me there's an issue here. Can you just rapidly remediate it? So Billy, is that kind of where we're seeing our new resiliency service really take down some of these major areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Those are the 5 big things that we see every day in this industry, whether that be a BEC side or a ransomware side. One of the two is very relevant at the bare minimum. And those are the big steps that really keep you secure. And if worst case scenario, you do experience an incident, 2 of those are very critical to make sure they're in place moving forward so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And Billy, if there is a security incident, somebody needs immediate response, they can always go to our website, and we have a form. You can always engage us through that. There's a 1-800 number as well. This is our bread and butter, is incident response. And I think that to highlight some of the other capabilities is one is that incident response retainer, which we've seen so effective. When you have a contract that's in place already, you have a team that gets onboarded. You understand what that client's environments, do they have EDR? Do they have a SIM? What's their firewall? How their infrastructure is set up? It gives us a good idea. So when your team, those DFIR guys, hit the door, they know a lot more about the environment than normal than if it was just an insurance claim. If it's just an insurance claim coming through the front door, whatever client's coming through the front door, we service. But when you have a retainer customer, there's a much stronger relationship. There's a quarterly meetings we meet with that customer. It's more of a driving maturity in incident response instead of just being some bucket of hours towards it. But is that an accurate description of our IR retainer program?
Absolutely, right. You definitely get a jump start, right? We're familiar with the environment. We're familiar with what is in place, so we don't have to go through that hour scoping call. The statements of work are a lot easier to prep and get over to a retainer client. So it definitely increases that first 24, 48 hours down to as minimal as possible, which is really the critical stage, right? That first 48 hours of every case is when there's so many moving parts, and just being able to eliminate 2 or 3 of those pain points is absolutely helpful.
Yeah, and I view insurance in many ways as just like homeowners insurance, right? Only major disasters do you run through there. But when you need rapid investigations internally, having the SOWs, having the paperwork done, just the speed in which we're able to respond to our customers is just tremendous. That is a big selling point to having a retainer. I remember when I'm from New Orleans, right? So Hurricane Katrina hit, and I was homeless for about 3 months, 4 months. Didn't have a job, didn't have a house, didn't have a bank account. It was underwater because I had a little credit union and so forth. Major disaster. During that, we had 2 banks that I had subcontracted to, Whitney Bank, and then I knew of Capital One. And they both had, and another bank that will be nameless. This other bank that was nameless had a generator system that was very old. It didn't work well. And then you had Whitney Bank had a state-of-the-art type generator that ran during that time. And you would think the state-of-the-art generator would have stayed up, and we would have been able to service our customers and online banking and everything for that time period. And it wasn't. It was that other older generator, and it had nothing to do with the equipment. It had to do with a fuel contract, because when everything was disaster, those generators run 48 hours, 72 hours, and then that's it. If you don't have a fuel contract, the service providers don't take on new contracts. They don't take new contracts on, get to the end of the line. So it's almost the same thing in a cyber disaster, like a cyber Katrina in many ways. If you have like Log4j or you have SolarWinds, good luck trying to get IR firms to be able to respond off the street. If you have a contract with us, it obligates us to us. We're there for you. And it's just a different scenario in those major disasters. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we always see that as a benefit. So tell me this, Karla and Billy, what are your predictions in the future? Anything like that? Anything you're going to see emerging? Everybody talks about AI and threat actors. So you can imagine someone would ask the same thing, Billy. Are Are threat actors using AI? And Karla, is known threat actors using AI, and somehow it's a buzzword. But what are your thoughts in that area?
We feel that they're using AI in negotiations, like the language skills that we see are definitely better than maybe they were even just a year ago. But what we're seeing in terms of the data from our cases is that it's still those key things. So the key things that you just listed off, like backups aren't configured properly. Maybe you have MFA. There's definitely an increase in companies who have MFA, but it's not on that one account, or it's not the right type of MFA. It's not configured well. So it's still the basic things. Threat actors don't need to use AI right now because it's still pretty easy to do the things they've always been doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you think all the phishing companies now, all the phishing threat actors are all using ChatGPT or some kind of long language model and bridging that gap language wise, right? That's interesting. I did see someone said that they think Google is going to go away. Like search is going to die because nobody's searching. Like their search and results in Google has dropped significantly. Everyone's using ChatGPT or some other large language model for things. Because think about it, when you do a Google search, it's all keyword. But I can actually give a lot of context in directions with ChatGPT, where you can't do that with a Google search. I think that it's going to be interesting as that whole world evolves and moves forward. And I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. I guess my initial reaction on that is the cost, right? It's expensive to do AI searches. And right now, the companies are just pushing the money into that. But maybe they change the limits, right? And paid for versions come at lower limits, and you want to flip back to Google because you don't want to pay for it. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah,
I
I
think
definitely think even now you already see it on Google, right? You're starting to see Gemini really, which is Google's version of ChatGPT, really be integrated into the search. It's the top piece there. So I would definitely see Google starting to transition to more AI-based responses than a traditional keyword type of searches as well.
It makes sense. And I think just using it for day to day, being able to clean up language, be able to push things out, your intent in your conversation is what you intended it for. I think it's a great tool. And so I think you're going to see a lot more Copilot probably deployments and having to deal with Copilot in environments and using that whole Microsoft stack. Now, Karla, if I wanted intelligence services, and I wanted to take a look at what do I need to do? There's a lot of people who run cybersecurity. They have no idea about Intel. When they think about Intel, they think of just a feed. Like there's some Intel feed, JSON feed, taxi, something like that comes into my SIM or some kind of security device that I have. But how should somebody really look at Intel strategically as they're trying to figure out what to do for the new year?
Yeah, I have a great team of very experienced Intel professionals. So we do a couple of things. So we're taking the data from the cases that we're working on in response and coming up with what are the trends? What are the new threat patterns? What should you be worried about? Because everyone's at risk from financially motivated cybercrime. But they're also looking at the attack surface of the organization and then making that really relevant. So rather than getting a feed and getting noise and getting told about things that, don't impact you, or having to go through Twitter and all the other websites and try and figure out what's relevant to you, they'll tell you, hey, we see this issue and this is why you need to care about it. And this is what you need to go do with it. So yeah, we have a great team that's really making that intelligence actionable and relevant to the clients that we're working with.
That makes sense. I had Intel save my life one time at the company I was working at. I was running cyber ops for a large pharmaceutical right during the pandemic, about 60,000 desktops and users. And I had an intelligence briefing from our Intel team. This is when I was at Booz Allen Hamilton. And they told us that ransomware actors who were not getting paid after ransoms were initiating extortion attempts and denial of service attacks afterward. They would attempt denial of service onto that customer. During a meeting I had with the CISO, she had asked, hey, is there any threats I need to know about? Are threat actors changing? And I just happened to be on an Intel briefing that morning, and I told her about ransomware actors shifting using denial of service. That prompted a conversation to say, what is our denial of service capability for this large organization? And she said, I'm going to have to go check on that. Went back to her people, found out that the program was actually put on hold. She reinitiated it. Within about, 4 weeks after that meeting, they got hit with a massive denial of service. And the only way they were able to recover is that they had that hardware already in place from that intelligence brief. So to me, that was the first real world example of an intelligence brief stopping a massive disruption of a company's infrastructure by talking about, hey, I saw a shift in the threat actor. They're doing this. Do you have a control for denial of service? And if they wouldn't have had the hardware in place, because the way the hardware worked was, I think it was an Akamai solution, it has to tunnel out like a GRE tunnel to a data center, and then it sends data scrubbed over to it. The attack is so massive, they can't even initiate the connections with the hardware. But if it wasn't in place, we would have been down for 2-3 weeks waiting for hardware to come in place, or having our provider shunt it to ground. So it was just a really massive problem. But I think this highlighted, how do I take stuff like FSISAC or HSISAC or anything from the ISACs, and I give a comprehensive picture to a customer of what their threat landscape looks like.
One of I think the most valuable pieces of data we have is what CVEs we're seeing ransomware groups use. If you think about all the CVEs that you'll get returned from a scan, and you can go and get your CVSS scores, but you need to know which ones are exploited, and then really which ones are being exploited by a group that is potentially going to be interested in your organization. Getting a list of things like that from us where we can match what you have with what we're seeing, that can be really valuable to help you stay protected.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Billy, from your perspective, a young incident responder, I get this question a lot. Somebody trying to enter the industry, they're trying to learn, they're trying to do what you do day in, day out. What's your recommendations for the path? If somebody's in school, they're trying to get their degree, or they're not, they're trying to get certifications, what path do you recommend to do what you do?
Yeah, actually, I have really good insight. I've hired hundreds of people into various companies in this industry. Technical background, right? There's a lot of technical issues that you really need to understand, right? When it comes to either forensic evaluation, understanding what type of logs or what type of artifacts lead to specific outcomes is definitely going to be helpful. And it's really understanding the technical aspect of Windows. Beyond that, I've actually seen some really good success with kids coming out of the boot camps. There's some cybersecurity boot camps out there that really do prepare kids well. They teach them the right tools, like Zimmerman tools, FDK Imager, some of the tools that we still use here. And there's some great boot camps that you don't necessarily have to have that 4-year or 5-year of college and a master's in cybersecurity.
Is there one you recommend?
I don't know the name offhand, but I can absolutely chase that down. But yeah, no, like I said, there's some really good boot camps out there that they teach you the relevant stuff of what is happening, what tools are actually the top tools to analyze these types of investigations.
Yeah, excellent. I think there's a lot of people that want to get into it. It sounds like a great job. You called at 2 a.m. and you're jumping into a client's environment, but it's definitely can be very chaotic. And Karla, from your perspective, if you have someone that's wants an intelligence field or wants to do what it is that you do, what do you recommend from a young person that's coming up, and how do they focus their career?
Threat intelligence, I think, is one of the areas where if you really want to get into cyber, I think it's a great place to start, because if you have enough interest to go do your research and you've got a questioning mindset where you can ask those like extra questions, like, is this good? Is this a good source? Like, what is this telling me? What can I do with it? And if you can write well, then you've got a really good chance at being successful at this type of roles. Like I have said for a long time, threat intelligence is a great way to get started in cybersecurity. It can be tough now. Cyber's not necessarily a really easy industry to break into at the moment. And I think this is one of the areas where you don't have to do a ton of courses to be able to start your career.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are intimidated by that. I think a lot of people gravitate in Intel because they were in the military and they came over from the military, and it's a natural fit. But the kids coming out of college, that's always an option. I get kids ask me, hey, I want to do like CSI, where you hack into the CIA database and you move over to FBI. That's all bull. That don't work. It's not real. But you could see where they view that job as being sexy and intelligence, and you're knowing what's happening before everybody else does. And I guess in cyber intelligence, we're really falling behind the threat actor. We're running after them. We're not running in front of them. Is that a good way to describe it?
I guess so. The goal is always, what can you find out that helps you be predictive? And as much as we might be reporting on what they're doing, if you can then help a company or an organization get in front of them, there's that element to it as well.
That's what I like the most. That's the strategic aspect of intelligence, because it's okay, we know this information. What do we do with it? How is the strategic angle towards it? So that's why I think that's so important. Yeah. I really appreciate y'all's time today. Anything else y'all think y'all want to talk about?
I think we covered, yeah, so much. But if that leads to someone having questions on the intel or the data or all the things that we can do to help organizations protect themselves, definitely open to questions and connecting. And I'm sure Billy is too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Put those comments in here. You'll see this on the video. You're able to put those comments. We'll respond to those. You can always go to our website too, surefirecyber.com. You can see all the services that are on there. And Karla, there's an Intel feed. Can you sign up for that? Is that coming up or?
Yeah, one of the types of intelligence we provide is the IOCs that we're seeing in ransomware cases, so that you can, if that is something you've got set up, that you can ingest those.
Well, awesome. Appreciate y'all's time today and look forward to talking to you again here soon. For the entire audience, really appreciate your time. If you could hit that comment and subscribe, and I'll talk to everyone soon. Stay secure.